Chapter 1868, The Drucker People. A bright light opened up by Deng Shintong allowed everyone to see the world in front of them clearly for the time being, but beyond that light was a darkness so thick it looked like smudged ink. It was as if something was compressing the light and preventing it from spreading. Fatty Su muttered, "Deng Shintong, can't you light the lamp a little brighter?" Deng Shintong glanced at him and said with some dissatisfaction, "Do you think it's because I don't want to?" He looked up, his eyes slightly narrowed, a hint of caution and fear in his gaze for the unknown. "Something terrifying has appeared, and my power is suppressed in the face of it." Everyone was on high alert, staring at the sky above their heads. Dark clouds covered everything in the sky and on the ground, an abyssal darkness that seemed to engulf even the light. The sound of the wind whistling in their ears was like the roar of millions of beasts in the clouds. Liang Yu couldn't help but rest her right hand on the hilt of her sword, her eyes fierce, ready to face any possible threat. No one's nerves were not on edge throughout the entire Chernobyl wasteland. Since the Fremon's rebellion, there have been too many things in this world that they cannot understand with their common sense. And what can they do in the face of all this? They can only, as they are doing now, face the unknown darkness of the present, hold their weapons tightly, and wait helplessly for the unknown to come. Beyond the gate of light, the Tanu Palace is dissipating. At this moment, Zhang Yi feels completely at ease. The three of them feel as if they have undergone a thorough cleansing. The 14.8 billion copies of spiritual essence from the Yihen tribe have been released from the Tanu Palace and will eventually return to the ether. Immersed in this vast sea of spiritual energy, Zhang Yi feels as if he has returned to the womb of his mother, comfortable and warm. Many fragmented memories of the experiences of these Yihen people emerged in his mind. They were like a gentle breeze, leaving no trace in his mind and quickly dissipating. This was the same feeling Zhang Yi had when he first entered the ether. It was like a dream, and when you wake up from a dream, you don't remember anything, but the feeling still lingers. The Yihen tribe, a race of people created by the Creator with the highest spirituality. These 14.8 billion spiritual essences, the mass of which exceeds the total mass of the spiritual essence of the entire universe today, have erupted, and the three people in the center, Zhang Yi, are bearing the power of it. At this moment, Zhang Yi finally understands why the administrator looked so unimpressed when he asked for a reward. After all, compared to such a grand baptism, all material rewards seem so insignificant. Yang Xinxin closed her eyes, and her body had now become almost transparent. After being bathed in the endless spiritual energy, her body in the physical world had become dispensable. At that moment, she had already become a high-dimensional being. Ichigard felt his own transformation and shouted in excitement. "Ah, this is the feeling. It's wonderful, I can feel myself transforming. Perhaps this is my opportunity to break away from being a level 5 life form and transform into a level 6 superdimensional life form." Suddenly, he burst into tears of grief. Wrong, all wrong. The path taken by the Tsang Yuan clan was doomed to fail from the very beginning. The Knight of Cross told him about the nature of the physical world. Form is powerless, formlessness is powerful. Spirit is the true essence of the universe. Therefore, their abandonment of the internal cultivation of spirituality and pursuit of the development of mechanical civilization was equivalent to taking a deviant path that departed from the true path. No wonder they eventually ushered in their own destruction. At this moment, Zhang Yi was immersed in the ocean of spiritual matter. There was no change in his body, but his essence, the spirit, within his body, was growing robustly. He understood what the spirit of sacrifice and the source of God really were. When the spiritual essence returns to the ether realm, it will be separated from the energy that remains in the physical world. This energy will be absorbed by other intelligent beings, allowing them to complete their transformation. The source of God is the impurities removed from the spiritual essence. This substance contains what an intelligent being has gained in a lifetime. Therefore, only intelligent beings of the same species can absorb it and evolve. However, for intelligent beings of other species, it is a deadly poison. Therefore, the source of God can only allow people to break through the restrictions of genetic locks. The spirit of sacrifice, on the other hand, is the purest spiritual power. Its absorption does not cause any harm and can allow a person's spiritual body to continue growing. Zhang Yi wandered in the midst of this torrent, while the four knights stood far away, guarding everything they had inherited from the Yihen tribe. The Knight of Thorns looked at Yang Xinxin, Ichigard and Zhang Yi, and his voice suddenly took on an ancient and distant feeling. How far can the successors who have inherited our legacy go? Can they find the answers to the things we were unable to accomplish? The Knight of the Rabid Dog let out a sigh. It's difficult, very difficult. If this world is all an illusion, and the meaning of our existence as creatures is determined by the supreme will, then our existence is but an illusion. How can we possibly break free? As he spoke, his eyes revealed a lost look, and then he asked the question that the administrator had asked during the initial trial. What is the meaning of life? No one could give him an answer. They were tired of the endless cycle of everything, and decided to leave, leaving the question for future generations. However, at this moment, the voice of the administrator suddenly sounded above the Tanu Palace. Warning! The spiritual realm space is being attacked by external forces and will be broken soon. Upon hearing this voice, the four knights' gazes suddenly became fierce. Finally, it's here? They didn't look surprised in the least, as if they had long expected this moment. Crack! A black crack suddenly appeared in the white sky above the celestial vault. The crack grew larger and larger, before cracking and shattering open. The celestial vault of the Tanu Palace collapsed. Built with the technology of a high civilization, the barrier of the Tanu Palace, which had existed for billions of years, was completely destroyed at this moment. Outside the bright Tanu Palace was an indescribable darkness. The noise made Zhang Yi unable to help but open his eyes and look up. At this moment, he saw a scene that he would never forget in his life. Above the sky, the barrier of the Tanu Palace was like an eggshell, and a huge force had broken open a hole from the outside. Outside the hole, there appeared an indescribable, but hideous and terrifying face. What kind of face was it? It was huge beyond imagination, and the face, which was as dark as the abyss, made it almost impossible to see anything. There was only a bloody pupil in the center of the forehead, which suddenly opened. Behind him was a dark abyss, spinning like a wheel of fate behind his head. A large amount of spiritual essence unconsciously escaped from the broken area. Suddenly, a dark arm popped out from the broken hole, and then it reached out, and a large amount of spiritual essence was forcefully grasped in its palm as if attracted by something. Zhang Yi watched the scene in disbelief. At that moment of grasping, he seemed to hear the wailing of countless spiritual essences. But this was probably his illusion, because the spiritual substance that chose to return to the ether realm and leave the physical world would lose its self-awareness. After the dark monster's grab, at least hundreds of thousands of spiritual substances were in his palm. Then Zhang Yi saw a ghastly white mouth appear on his black face. He opened his mouth wide, and every tooth was sharp as a sword. He tilted his head back, shoved all the spiritual essence into his mouth, and then swallowed it with great relish. Zhang Yi was completely stunned by this scene. Although they were separated by a great distance, he could also feel the monster's enormous and terrifying size. It was as if it had come from another world and was going to completely destroy the entire Tanu Palace. Zhang Yi also deeply felt the insignificance of his own life. In front of him, all living beings seemed to be reduced to bait. He realized what this thing really was. It was the Creator's failed creation, a terrifying creature that even the Creator's repeated descent of God's punishment had failed to eradicate, the Drucker. Rumble. Zhang Yi heard the sound of thunder in his ears, as if a powerful will was descending from beyond the dark heavens. In an instant, a huge beam of light descended from the depths of the universe and slammed into the back of the dark Drucker Titan. Boom! The light of the universe was vast, and its power made Zhang Yi's heart tremble from a distance. The three of them, Zhang Yi, Ichigard and Yang Xinxin, looked up at the scene, completely transfixed. The impact of that dimensional energy had exceeded the limits of their imagination. They knew that it was the Creator, Kagago, who had struck. but the dark Drucker had blocked the creator's attack. The huge dark vortex behind him was spinning rapidly, as if it could devour everything in the physical world. Ling once said to Zhang Yi, "Those guys can devour everything in the physical world." But Zhang Yi was staring blankly at the dark Drucker Titan. The dark power, the huge black hole vortex, made him feel incredibly familiar. That power seemed to be the same as his power of the void. As for the power of the void, Zhang Yi was not sure where it came from. It was only after his space ability had been upgraded to a certain level that he could draw on this power from the plane where the alternate dimension was located. At the moment, he saw the Drucker Titan fighting against the heavenly power. The huge dark vortex was like a huge black sphere, hanging high behind the Drucker Titan, devouring the cosmic light that the Creator had sent down. Zhang Yi's excited body was trembling. That was how the power of the void should look. Powerful and dark, it could devour everything in the world. A sea of spiritual substance washed over Zhang Yi's body, and at this moment, a passage of text suddenly appeared in his mind. Avoid God's will, avoid cause and effect, all kinds of shackles imprison the true self, go with God's will, accept cause and effect, only today do I know that I am me, once I realize the truth, I have nothing to fear from the shackles of the past. The shackles of the world are but a dream, formless, shapeless, and without me. This text comes from the original Heart Sutra by the sage Wang Shouren. Since obtaining the scripture, Zhang Yi has always treasured it. Unfortunately, due to his limited knowledge of classical Chinese and his lack of attainment, even with Yang Xinxin's help in interpreting the text, he was unable to understand the meaning beyond the literal words. It wasn't until this moment, after the 14.8 billion spiritual essences of the Yihan tribe had washed over his body and purified his soul, and after witnessing the scene of the Drucker Titan fighting against the Creator's might, that he suddenly understood something within his heart. He couldn't explain it, but his understanding of himself and of time and space had reached a new level. The four knights saw the arrival of the Drucker Titan and did not show the slightest fear in their eyes. They could not allow Drucker to continue devouring spiritual essence. Returning to the ether realm was the ultimate will of the gods, and Kagago also needed the results of the 14.8 billion spiritual essences observations of the physical world over billions of years. Therefore, they decided to act. The organic terminal created by the Yihan tribe represented their most powerful combat system, with the ability to fight against Drucker. At this time, the spiritual baptism had reached its end, and the light began to fade. The entire Tanu Palace was shining with a radiance that came from the spiritual body. Not only the Tanu Palace, but also the outside world was shining brightly at this moment. No matter where on the planet one was, there was a hazy but magnificent radiance that seemed to be saying a final goodbye to the world. The Holy Roman Church's capital, the Vatican. Pope Alexander X kneels in prayer on the Piazza Tevere, his eyes streaming with tears. This is the will of the gods. Everything will return to heaven in the end. Only by believing in the gods can one find relief. On a small island in the Pacific Ocean, Montesquieu, the president of the pupil organization, sits in a wheelchair and stares deeply out the window. At this time, it should be dark, but the outside world is shrouded in a hazy, sacred white light. An unusual emotion wells up in his somewhat cloudy eyes. The apocalypse is coming. He looked up at the sky and said leisurely. On the wasteland of the former site of Chernobyl, these people, who were closest to the space node, were all amazed by the miracle before them. At this moment, Deng Shintong suddenly frowned. He touched his forehead and suddenly felt that something had changed in his body. It seemed that his eyes could see more clearly, and his body had become lighter. The release of 14.8 billion spiritual essences had caused the spiritual essence to return to the ether realm, and the energy contained in spirituality would be completely released throughout the physical world. The impact of this change on the world was 10 times greater than the onset of the Ice Age 3 years ago. Many people who had survived until that day suddenly found that they had undergone significant changes. In many corners of the world, people who were previously considered to be without supernatural talent suddenly began to awaken their supernatural abilities. And for those ability users who had awakened earlier, they unexpectedly received a second awakening and their power was enhanced by leaps and bounds. Miracles! People exclaimed in excitement. In the Tanu Palace, Zhang Yi closed his eyes and felt the imperceptible changes he had just comprehended. A great sword appeared in the hands of the Knight of Cross. With a single wave of his hand, a huge portal of light appeared in front of him. You guys should get out of here quickly. We will hold him off, and then we will return to the ether as well, he said to the three people in an emotionless tone. Zhang Yi slowly opened his eyes. He suddenly felt a strong sense of murderous intent coming from afar. It was the gaze of Ichigard. There was undisguised murderous intent in those eyes. Having obtained the inheritance of the Yihen tribe, at this time, Ichigard only felt that he had become closer to a higher dimensional life. He had the opportunity to save the Zhang tribe from extinction and recreate the glory of the tribe. But right in front of him, there were two others like him, who had also been baptized in the spiritual ocean. He could not allow such existences in this world. However, it didn't matter anymore. As long as he left here, he would kill these two people as soon as possible. No matter how talented they are, the gap in strength between them and him is irreparable once they go outside. Zhang Yi knows exactly what Ichigard is thinking, and he is thinking the same thing. At this moment, Ling is no longer the same as before. She walked forward step by step, and an ice-blue radiance gradually appeared on her body, forming a kind of armor similar to dragon scales on her body. And the thing wrapped in white cloth that she had been holding in her arms was, surprisingly, a huge long sword. Zhang Yi had never thought of it as a sword because it was so big, almost like a club. If such a weapon was hung at the waist, it was feared that it could not be drawn at all. But the next moment, Ling showed Zhang Yi how to use it correctly. With her hands, she raised the huge long sword high above her head, and then she drew it out with a clang. Her stance was like that of someone trying to push back a huge mountain. The moment the sheath of the sword was split open, an immensely powerful radiance shot up into the sky, like an eternal rainbow of light, heading straight for the Drucker Titan. With just one slash, a huge gash appeared on Drucker's chest, deep down to the bone. Zhang Yi looked at Ling's back, where her body was slowly dissipating and her spirit was slowly fading away. If she had not decided to return to the ether, perhaps she alone could have fought the Drucker Titan. After all, this was a powerful race favored by the Creator. Ling! Zhang Yi called out her name from when she was human. Ling did not turn around, but said, "Hurry and go. This is not a safe place. We are about to return to the ether, and can only guarantee to send you away." Zhang Yi knew that time was not waiting for anyone, and hurriedly said, "Can I ask you one last favor?" It was only at this time that Ling looked back at Zhang Yi. She gave this human, who had piqued her interest, one last look. Ichigard gave one last look at the sky, where the battle was no longer one that he, at his current level, could participate in. A longing look came into his eyes. Now that he had obtained the Yihen clan's heritage, his greatest wish was to allow the Zhang clan to rise again and use the Yihen clan's heritage to dominate the world and finally achieve eternal existence. He could not understand the troubles of the Yihen tribe. After all, their civilization had not lasted that long, and they had never achieved true immortality. They were defective products, and even he had almost decayed over the long years. Ichigard turned around and quickly flew towards the Gate of Light. However, as he got closer to the gate, his pupils suddenly contracted, and his body stopped in mid-air at extreme speed. In front of the Gate of Light, a huge dimensional gate blocked the exit. The fluctuations in space were changing, and Ichigard could clearly feel it. Zhang Yi and Yang Xinshin appeared nearby, and Ichigard turned his head to meet their gazes. "Want to get out of here? Do you think I'll give you that chance?" Zhang Yi's voice was cold, like a howling wind blowing past Ichigard's ears. Ichigard narrowed his eyes and looked at the two ants before him. He admitted that these two had great potential and could grow to amazing heights given enough time. But right now, these two were no threat to him at all. At a time like this, you don't want to escape from this dangerous place, but instead fight me? Ichigard's gaze surveyed the battlefield above the sky. For knights from the Yihan tribe were attacking the Drucker Titan, and the energy ripples they created were isolated, but still thrilling to behold. Zhang Yi shook his head and spoke indifferently. Your leaving here is a greater threat to me. In the eyes of the Drucker Titan, the existence of someone like Zhang Yi, those so-called powerful people in the outside world, are not qualified to be his food. But once Ichigard returns to the outside world, he will surely set off a storm, and no one knows how many people will die because of him. The peaceful world that Zhang Yi wants will no longer exist. What's more, Zhang Yi knows full well that Ichigard will definitely kill him first. Therefore, he wants to kill him here while their strengths are still on the same level. Ha, Ichigard sneered. Zhang Yi said indifferently, I forgot to tell you. The world is collapsing, and its rules are slowly being lifted. I asked Ling to lift the rule against being resurrected in the outside world after death. So if you die here, you really will die. The Yihan tribe, who have mastered the technology of immortality, can allow the soul to exist independently of the body, and then create a new body at any time. The true soul cannot be destroyed, and will only return to the ether. Therefore, the way to resurrect the dead is to prevent the true spirit from returning to the ether, then use technology to repair the body and inject the spirit. Ichigard's gaze became even more cold. He laughed, his body shaking violently. Ha ha ha. The sword in Ichigard's hand pointed at Zhang Yi. Sorry, but that kind of tactic is useless here. As soon as he finished speaking, the sword in his hand suddenly thrust at the dimensional gate blocking the exit. Space shock. He wanted to break through the dimensional gate. As long as he could get out, he would win. Swish. Zhang Yi took a step forward and stood in front of Ichigard. Ichigard's sword did not pause for a moment. His sword was even faster than before. After being baptized in the sea of spiritual essence, he had also undergone a metamorphosis. The red sword, with its unstoppable sharpness, pierced directly at Zhang Yi. This sword strike could shake open space, and even if Zhang Yi used everything under heaven to block, he might not be able to stop it. Unless he evaded, but he knew that Zhang Yi would not evade. A dilemma was placed before Zhang Yi.